There's something almost mythic about the way childhood worked in the 1970s. Not because anyone planned it that way, but because life itself created a kind of unspoken contract between parents and children, a contract built on freedom. While modern childhood is wrapped in schedules, supervision, and satellite tracking, the 1970s felt like an entirely different universe. Back then, parents weren't hovering. They were working, surviving, trusting. Neighborhoods functioned like small ecosystems, held together by front porches, familiar faces, and a shared belief that kids didn't need constant protection to stay safe. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. The world is yours. Go figure it out. And you did. You learned the rhythm of your street, the way explorers read coastlines by wandering, observing, bumping into trouble, backing out of it, and trying again. You knew the sound of every screen door, every barking dog, every shortcut home. There was no agenda, no curated activities, no adult narrating how to behave or what to think. What you had was space. Space to roam, space to get lost, space to grow into yourself without anyone watching too closely. It didn't feel profound at the time. It just felt normal. But this ordinary freedom, this wide, unstructured stretch of childhood, was shaping something inside you. A kind of quiet competence, a confidence that didn't need applause, a belief that you could navigate the world because you'd been doing it from the moment you could tie your shoes. That was the contract of the 1970s. Unspoken, yes, but powerful enough to shape an entire generation. If freedom was the contract of 1970s childhood, then unstructured play was the training ground where an entire generation learned how to think, not because teachers assigned it, not because experts recommended it, but because no one was orchestrating your day for you. You walked out the door and the world became your classroom. Those long afternoons, wandering from yard to yard, inventing games with nothing more than sticks, dirt, and imagination, were not just entertainment. Neuroscientists now understand that this type of unsupervised, self-directed play is one of the most powerful catalysts for developing what psychologists call executive function. It's the mental toolkit that governs planning, focus, adaptability, emotional regulation, and problem solving. The very skills employers today call critical thinking, and parents call maturity. But in the 1970s, no one used those words. You just figured things out. When a game fell apart because someone got mad, you negotiated the rules. When the fort collapsed, you rebuilt it using whatever scraps you could find. When boredom hit you like a wall, you didn't run to an adult. You dug into your own head and created something out of nothing. This wasn't chaos, it was self-governance. Children today grow up in carefully designed environments where adults set the terms, manage the emotions, and preempt conflict. But 1970s kids built their own worlds from scratch, testing boundaries in real time, adapting without instruction manuals, discovering cause and effect the way scientists do through direct experience. And something else happened, too, something harder to measure but impossible to ignore. Your imagination expanded. Because without structured entertainment, your mind became the entertainment. You created stories, characters, entire universes. You learned to make something from nothing, a skill that follows you into adulthood, shaping the way you solve problems, innovate, and navigate uncertainty. Free play didn't just fill time, it forged the mental architecture for creativity and lifelong resilience. One of the strangest gifts of growing up in the 1970s is the kind you didn't even know you were developing. A finely tuned social radar, a sixth sense for people, moods, and danger. It wasn't taught. It wasn't explained. It was absorbed, because when you grow up navigating the world without constant adult supervision, you learn to read it fast. You learned which houses you could cut through and which ones meant trouble. You learned the sound of a teenager's voice that meant come hang out versus the one that meant run. You knew when the older kids were in a generous mood and when their silence meant you should keep your distance. This wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. Long before psychologists called it situational awareness, you were practicing it on sidewalks, in backyards, and at the edge of driveways. Your brain was constantly scanning for tone, posture, energy shifts, tiny social cues that told you what kind of moment you were stepping into. Modern kids often have adults narrating every social interaction. Say sorry, use your words, be polite. But 1970s kids didn't get translation or commentary. You learned the emotional weather of a group the way sailors read the sea by watching the waves, not by waiting for instructions. And here's the part people rarely talk about. This social radar followed you into adulthood. It's why you can walk into a room and instantly sense tension. Why you notice micro-expressions others miss. Why you can predict conflict before it happens. You weren't trained in emotional intelligence. You lived it, one unsupervised afternoon at a time. There's a specific memory almost every 1970s kid carries. That moment when the school bus pulled away, you walked up to your house, lifted the flower pot, and grabbed the key waiting underneath. No audience, no supervision, no fear, just the quiet click of the lock and the soft hum of an empty home. People today might call it neglect, but for you, it was normal. And without anyone realizing it, those silent afternoons were sculpting your mind. You learned competence not from pep talks, but from doing things yourself. Heating up a snack, starting homework, entertaining yourself, solving boredom and problems without a single adult stepping in. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something powerful formed inside you, an internal locus of control, the belief that your actions create your outcomes. If you made a mess, you cleaned it. If something went wrong, you figured out why. If you forgot something, you lived with the consequences and tried again tomorrow. This wasn't independence as a slogan, it was independence as a daily reality. But there was a shadow side too. When you grow up proving you can handle everything alone, asking for help can feel foreign, even uncomfortable. Self-reliance becomes both your strength and your armor. Still, the foundation it built is undeniable. A quiet confidence, a trust in your own abilities, a sense that you can navigate life, because for so many years you already did. One unlocked door, one empty house, one afternoon at a time. If there's one experience almost every 1970s kid remembers, it's this: wandering into the living room, collapsing onto the couch, and announcing, "I'm bored," and hearing the same response every single time. Go find something to do. No tablet, no endless TV, no curated activities waiting to entertain you. Just an open afternoon and a restless mind searching for direction. What no one understood then, but neuroscience confirms now, is that boredom wasn't a problem. It was a catalyst. When your outer world went quiet, your inner world woke up. Your brain learned to stretch, wander, and generate ideas on its own. Sticks became swords. Cardboard became cities. A patch of grass became the setting for entire storylines only you could see. This ability to create meaning out of stillness is something many adults lose. But 1970s kids carried it forward. It became the root of your creativity, your problem solving, your capacity to think deeply without needing constant stimulation. Modern research calls it spontaneous cognition, but for you, it was simply Saturday. Yet boredom didn't just build imagination. It built emotional tolerance, the ability to sit with discomfort without escaping it, to wait, to think, to let your mind settle before acting. In a world now allergic to empty moments, you developed a rare skill, the ability to be alone with your thoughts and not fear them. That quiet, understated mental strength didn't come from achievement. It came from afternoons where nothing happened, and your brain learned to make something out of nothing. If you grew up in the 1970s, you didn't learn about danger from warning labels, helmets, or safety briefings. You learned it the hard way through scraped knees, busted handlebars, and that split second when the branch you were climbing started to bend a little too far. Risk wasn't theoretical, it was physical, immediate, real. You climbed trees high enough to see the whole neighborhood shrink beneath you. You rode your bike down hills so steep the wind stung your eyes. You jumped over makeshift ramps that looked questionable even to a 10-year-old. And sometimes you got hurt. But that was exactly how you learned. Your body became your teacher. Your pain became your feedback system. Your curiosity became your compass. Psychologists now call this embodied risk calibration, the ability to sense your limits because you felt them, not because someone defined them for you. It's why, as an adult, you can walk into a chaotic situation and instinctively know what's safe, what's stupid, and what's worth trying anyway. You're not reckless. You're informed by experience shaped by 1,000 small experiments in courage and consequence. But there's a shadow edge to this strength. Growing up, learning to push through it can make it harder to recognize emotional risks. Physical danger was clear. Emotional vulnerability, not so much. Still, the resilience born from those wild childhood moments remains. It's the reason you trust your instincts. The reason uncertainty doesn't paralyze you. The reason you know deep in your bones that fear and possibility often live side by side. Because you learn to navigate risk not by avoiding it, but by meeting it with both hands on the handlebars. There's a particular moment from 1970s childhood that almost no one talks about. The moment you were hurt, embarrassed, or overwhelmed, and there was no instant escape, no texting a friend, no scrolling for distraction, no dopamine hit waiting behind a screen. Just you, your room, and a feeling that sat heavy in your chest. Maybe you'd had a fight with your best friend. Maybe you failed a test. Maybe someone said something cruel on the playground, and it followed you home like a shadow. You'd lie on your bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing in around you. And something important happened in that silence. You learned to feel without fleeing, to let emotions rise, move through you, and eventually settle. Psychologists now call this emotional regulation, the capacity to tolerate discomfort without needing immediate relief. But back then, it was just part of growing up. You punched a pillow, you sulked, you thought, you breathed, and eventually, the feeling loosened its grip. This slow, natural unwinding built a kind of emotional muscle that many people today never get the chance to develop. It taught you that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent verdicts, that you can sit with disappointment without collapsing, that you can survive a bad moment without needing someone else to talk you down. But there was a quiet trade-off too. When you grow up handling every feeling alone, sharing them later in life can feel foreign, almost intrusive. Asking for comfort doesn't come naturally. Still, the strength remains. A steady inner core, shaped in childhood bedrooms, In the long, unhurried silence, where you learn the simplest and hardest truth, you can face your feelings and they will pass. For all the strength the 1970s forged in you, there's a quieter story running underneath, one that rarely gets acknowledged because independence was celebrated, not examined. Growing up self-sufficient wasn't always a choice. Sometimes it was a necessity. And when you learn to carry everything alone at a young age, you don't just build competence, you build armor. Armor that kept you safe then, but weighs on you now. Because behind the resilience, there were moments of loneliness you never named. Moments where you wished someone would notice you were struggling, but you also knew no one was coming. Moments where you swallowed disappointment, fear, or confusion, because there wasn't space or language to express them. Psychologists call this premature self-reliance. When children internalize the message that needing help is a burden, or worse, a weakness, and that belief doesn't disappear with age. As an adult, it can show up in subtle ways. You apologize for having emotions. You downplay your pain. You struggle to ask for support, even from the people closest to you. You excel in crises, but feel lost when things require vulnerability instead of strength. You give endlessly but have trouble receiving. You're comfortable being needed, but uncomfortable being known. This is the part of the story the 1970s never taught you how to navigate. The emotional cost of being capable too soon. Independence made you strong, yes, but it also taught you to shrink your needs, to silence soft feelings, to survive without connection, when what you actually needed was comfort, structure, or reassurance. None of this means you were unloved. It simply means you grew up in a world where emotional support wasn't the norm, so you learned to live without it. But the wounds remain, invisible, quiet, and carried with dignity, waiting for the moment you finally give yourself permission to feel what you never had the chance to feel back then. The 1970s didn't just shape your childhood, they shaped the way you move through adulthood, in love, in work, and in the way you raise your own children, because the wiring that formed in those early years never really left you. It simply evolved. In relationships, you often love through action rather than expression. You show up, you fix things, you carry the load quietly. But when it comes to speaking your feelings, you can hesitate not because you don't feel deeply, but because you learned early that emotions were something you handled on your own. Partners may sense a distance you don't intend, a kind of guardedness you can't fully explain. Vulnerability feels like a language you were never taught, one you're still learning as an adult. At work, your 1970s wiring becomes a superpower. You don't wait to be told what to do, you figure it out. You're reliable, self-directed, steady under pressure. Bosses call it initiative. Teammates call it dependability. But internally, it's simply the way you survived childhood. If something needed to get done, you did it. The shadow side, you push through exhaustion. You struggle to delegate. You normalize burnout because you grew up normalizing effort without complaint. And in parenting, the contrast becomes even sharper. You want your kids to be strong, capable, resourceful, but the modern world pushes fear, supervision, and control at every turn. So you try to balance it, giving freedom without neglect, letting them struggle without abandoning them, teaching resilience without repeating the emotional silence you grew up with. You consciously choose moments of softness because you know how much it mattered when softness was absent. And in doing so, you're rewriting the story, honoring the strength your childhood gave you, while giving your children what you never had the chance to receive. If you grew up in the 1970s, here's something you may have never heard clearly. You were never meant to carry everything alone. Your strength is real. Your resilience is remarkable. Your independence was earned, not inherited. But none of that means you must stay armored forever. It's okay to rest. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be soft in places you once had to be steel. You are not weak for wanting connection. You are not needy for longing to be understood. You are simply human, finally giving yourself the care you once had to go without. And if this video helped you feel seen or opened a door inside you you've kept closed for years, I'd love for you to stay. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the psychology behind who we become. And in the comments, share your story. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone.